Eleanor Finch was ambitious, intelligent, and determined to no longer be a secret. Lucas Bennett was respected, admired, and living a double life. Meredith Bennett was betrayed, humiliated, and out for revenge. When Eleanor's lifeless body was discovered in her apartment, it seemed like a tragic mystery, but hidden within her private messages was the truth that would unravel a web of lies, deception, and a murder fueled by desperation. Eleanor Finch was the kind of student every professor wished for: brilliant, disciplined, and unshakably focused. At 22, she was in the final year of her psychology degree at Westbridge University, a prestigious institution known for producing some of the country's finest scholars. Eleanor's professors often described her as mature beyond her years, a young woman who prioritized academics over fleeting college distractions. She was the student who always arrived early, sat in the front row, and submitted her assignments days before the deadline. Unlike many of her peers, Eleanor had little interest in social gatherings. While other students spent their weekends partying or unwinding at local bars, she preferred the quiet solace of the library. Her routine was predictable: lectures, study sessions, and long nights spent in her small off-campus apartment. Those who knew her would say she was private, even distant, but not in a way that suggested unhappiness. She was simply someone who valued solitude. Despite her reserved nature, Eleanor was not entirely without friends. Her roommate, Jessica Moore, often described her as kind but guarded, someone who rarely spoke about her personal life. Eleanor never mentioned dating anyone, nor did she seem interested in romantic relationships. It was as if she had built an invisible wall around herself, allowing only small glimpses of her thoughts to slip through in casual conversation. To those around her, she was a model student with a bright future, someone who had everything under control. But Eleanor had secrets. Hidden beneath her carefully constructed routine was another life, one she had taken great measures to keep concealed. Private messages stored on her phone, never shared with friends or family, hinted at a relationship that no one knew about, a relationship that, if exposed, could change everything. On the evening of March 17th, Eleanor was scheduled to present her final research project, a culmination of months of hard work. Her professors and classmates gathered in the lecture hall, expecting her usual punctuality, but she never arrived. At first, no one thought much of it. Perhaps she was running late or had fallen ill. But as the minutes stretched into hours and multiple calls to her phone went unanswered, concern grew. By the following morning, Jessica, who had assumed Eleanor had spent the night elsewhere, realized something was wrong. Eleanor's side of the room remained untouched, her bed still made, her belongings undisturbed. When she failed to respond to texts, Jessica went to her apartment, knocking repeatedly before using the spare key Eleanor had given her months ago. Inside, everything appeared normal at first. The door was locked, the windows shut. Nothing seemed out of place until Jessica entered the bedroom. There, lying on the bed, was Eleanor's lifeless body, her arms resting at her sides as if she had simply gone to sleep. A chilling silence filled the room. Eleanor was dead. Panic surged through Jessica as she called the police, her voice shaking as she tried to explain what she had found. When officers arrived, they quickly determined that this was no accident. Eleanor's phone was missing, but everything else remained untouched. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle. It was as if the killer had entered, taken what they needed, and vanished without a trace. Detectives arrived at Eleanor Finch's apartment within minutes of the 911 call, carefully stepping into the dimly lit space where her body had been found. The air was still, heavy with an eerie sense of something unfinished. The scene was unsettling, not because of the presence of violence, but because of the lack of it. There were no broken locks, no overturned furniture, and no immediate signs of a struggle. Eleanor lay on her bed, her expression peaceful, as if she had simply drifted off into an eternal sleep. But an autopsy would later reveal the truth. She had been suffocated. The absence of defensive wounds suggested that Eleanor had not fought back. This detail alone led investigators to one chilling conclusion: she had likely known her killer. Stranger-on-stranger crimes were often messy, impulsive, and chaotic. This was something else entirely. It was calculated, personal. Someone had been close enough to Eleanor to gain access to her home, to get close to her, and to take her life without resistance. One of the first things detectives noted was the missing phone. Everything else in Eleanor's apartment was in place. Her laptop sat open on her desk, a half-finished cup of tea rested on the nightstand, and even her wallet and keys were untouched. But the device that could provide the most insight into her final moments was gone. It was clear that whoever had done this had deliberately taken the phone, knowing it held something valuable. The question was, what? As investigators began piecing together Eleanor's last known movements, they turned to her classmates, professors, and friends, searching for any clue that might explain why someone would want her dead. Her roommate Jessica provided little insight, describing Eleanor as private but never troubled. She hadn't mentioned any conflicts, and she certainly hadn't spoken about a relationship. But then came a crucial revelation. Eleanor had recently become more secretive. A search of Eleanor's laptop uncovered deleted browser history and encrypted files. While it was common for students to clear their history, the presence of password-protected documents suggested she had been hiding something. Investigators worked with forensic analysts to recover the deleted content, and what they found was startling. Buried deep in her digital records were fragments of an online relationship, messages exchanged through an anonymous email account. The sender, identified only by the initial L, had been in frequent contact with Eleanor for months. The tone of their exchanges was intimate but cautious. They spoke of secrecy, of needing to be careful, of a relationship that could never be public. Most unsettling of all were Eleanor's final messages, sent just days before her death. She had been growing impatient, urging Elle to stop hiding and make a choice. She didn't want to live in secrecy any longer. It was the first real lead in the case. Someone had been involved with Eleanor in a way no one had known about. And if her messages were any indication, she had been pressuring them to reveal the truth. Investigators now had a direction to follow. Eleanor Finch had a secret, and someone had been willing to kill to keep it buried. Investigators followed the digital trail left behind in Eleanor Finch's hidden email account, determined to uncover the identity of the mysterious L. The exchanges between them were careful, never revealing too much, but the tone suggested a deep emotional connection. Eleanor had been growing frustrated. She wanted to be acknowledged, not hidden away like a shameful secret. In her final messages, she pushed Elle to make a decision, one that, judging by what happened next, they weren't ready to make. With the help of cybersecurity experts, detectives traced the email account to Lucas Bennett, a well-respected professor at Westbridge University. Married, charismatic, and highly regarded among both students and faculty, Lucas had never been linked to Eleanor in any noticeable way. His lectures were attended by hundreds of students, and while he had interacted with her academically, there had been no outward signs of anything more. When confronted, Lucas remained composed, insisting that while he and Eleanor had exchanged emails, there was nothing inappropriate between them. He claimed she had been an ambitious student who sought guidance, nothing more. But the evidence suggested otherwise. Deleted messages, recovered from Eleanor's cloud storage, revealed a different story, one of secret meetings, careful planning, and growing tension. Eleanor wanted their relationship to be real. Lucas wanted it to stay hidden. His alibi for the night of the murder was weak. He told investigators he had been working late at home, but his wife, Meredith, was out of town at the time, leaving no one to verify his whereabouts. His phone records showed he had been near Eleanor's apartment earlier that evening, but he denied ever going inside. Without solid proof placing him at the crime scene, detectives couldn't charge him. Then came another revelation. A search of Lucas's office turned up a journal belonging to Eleanor, tucked away in a locked drawer. The entries inside were damning. They spoke of love, betrayal, and promises broken. Eleanor had felt trapped, growing increasingly desperate for answers. In her last entry, she wrote about confronting Lucas. She believed she could persuade him to leave his wife, to stop pretending their relationship didn't exist. But she also feared what might happen if he refused. Still, without the missing phone, investigators lacked the crucial link between Lucas and the murder. They needed a breakthrough. Days later, one came from an unexpected source, a university janitor Cleaning out a storage area in a rarely used section of campus, discovered a phone wrapped in cloth, hidden behind old textbooks. It was Eleanor's. Detectives quickly analyzed the device, hoping for a final clue, and then they found it. A draft message, never sent, but time-stamped just minutes before her death. If anything happens to me, it's because of Lucas. He promised me we'd stop hiding. He lied. I'm done being a secret. It was enough to bring Lucas back in for questioning. But as investigators prepared to arrest him, new forensic evidence pointed in a shocking new direction, one they had never expected. The discovery of Eleanor Finch's missing phone was the turning point investigators had been waiting for. With the device finally in their possession, they combed through every file, text, and email, searching for the missing pieces of the puzzle. The unsent message naming Lucas Bennett as the person responsible sent shockwaves through the case. It was clear that Eleanor had feared for her safety. But was Lucas truly the killer, or was there more to the story? As detectives built their case, forensic analysis of the phone revealed another disturbing clue. In the hours leading up to Eleanor's murder, she had made multiple calls to an unknown number, each one lasting only a few seconds. Investigators traced the number to a disposable burner phone registered under a fake identity. The fact that Eleanor had been repeatedly calling a number meant to remain untraceable raised even more questions. Had she been trying to reach Lucas, or was someone else involved? Further examination of Eleanor's phone records exposed yet another strange detail. A series of deleted messages, retrieved through forensic recovery, revealed that she had been communicating with someone else besides Lucas. The sender's identity remained hidden, but the tone of the messages suggested desperation and anger. The final message, sent just hours before Eleanor's death, was short and chilling. "You have no idea what you've done. This ends tonight." Lucas, when brought back in for questioning, denied knowing anything about the message. He insisted that while he had been having an affair with Eleanor, he had not killed her. His panic was evident now, his once calm and composed demeanor cracking under pressure. When confronted with the unsent message Eleanor had written, he stammered but maintained his innocence. The pressure on Lucas intensified, but then came the twist no one had expected. A new forensic report provided a shocking revelation. DNA recovered from Eleanor's bed sheets and beneath her fingernails did not match Lucas Bennett. Instead, it belonged to someone else entirely, Meredith Bennett. Lucas's wife had unknowingly entered the investigation in the most unexpected way. Up until now, she had been overlooked, an absent figure in the background. Investigators had assumed she had been out of town, unaware of her husband's betrayal. But now, everything changed. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered records showing Meredith had returned home the day before Eleanor's murder, something Lucas had failed to mention. Surveillance footage from a gas station near Eleanor's apartment showed a woman matching Meredith's description just hours before the crime. She had been watching, waiting. Lucas, now confronted with the evidence against his wife, fell silent. His denial turned into quiet resignation. He knew. He had suspected it all along, but had been too afraid to say it. Eleanor had been suffocated, not by the man she had been having an affair with, but by the woman who had discovered the truth. And now, with the forensic results in hand, investigators had everything they needed to prove it. With the forensic evidence pointing directly at Meredith Bennett, investigators shifted their focus to uncovering her movements on the night of Eleanor Finch's murder. The pieces of the puzzle that had once seemed disjointed were now falling into place. Surveillance footage, cell phone records, and DNA evidence all painted a picture of a woman who had discovered her husband's infidelity and decided to take matters into her own hands. Detectives learned that Meredith had returned home earlier than expected, something Lucas had failed to disclose. Flight records confirmed that she had cut her trip short, arriving in town the night before Eleanor's murder. When confronted with the evidence, Lucas admitted that he had lied about her whereabouts, claiming he had been trying to protect her from public scrutiny. But in doing so, he had only delayed the inevitable. Further investigation revealed that Meredith had accessed Lucas's email account. Reading through his private exchanges with Eleanor, she had seen everything: the secret meetings, the promises, the lies. Enraged, she tracked Eleanor's address and, using a spare key Lucas had once kept, let herself inside the apartment. Meredith's plan wasn't necessarily to kill Eleanor, but when confronted, emotions boiled over. Investigators reconstructed the final moments of Eleanor's life based on the evidence. Meredith had likely arrived late in the evening, catching Eleanor off guard. The confrontation had started with words, pleading, accusations, and threats. But when Eleanor refused to back down, things turned violent. Unlike Lucas, who wanted to keep his affair hidden, Eleanor was no longer willing to remain a secret. She had spent months being patient, waiting for Lucas to make a decision, only to realize she had been deceived. She was ready to expose the truth, to tear apart the life Lucas had built, and that was something Meredith couldn't allow. The struggle had been brief. Meredith, in a fit of rage, had grabbed a pillow and pressed it over Eleanor's face. There were no defensive wounds because Eleanor hadn't expected to be attacked. The suffocation was quick but deliberate. Once it was over, Meredith took Eleanor's phone, knowing it contained messages that could incriminate Lucas. She wiped the device, deleted the call history, and discarded it in a hidden section of the university, never expecting it to be found. But what she didn't know was that Eleanor had already drafted a message, one she never had the chance to send, a message that would ultimately lead investigators to the truth. When police confronted Meredith with the overwhelming evidence, she broke down. At first, she tried to blame Lucas, insisting that he had manipulated both her and Eleanor. But when the DNA results, surveillance footage, and phone records were laid before her, she had no choice but to confess. Meredith was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Lucas, despite his infidelity, was cleared of any criminal involvement. The case was closed, but the tragedy remained. Eleanor Finch had died not because of her own choices, but because of the secrets of others. In the end, the truth had come out, but at a devastating cost.